It actually took shorter than for me to push the button. It needed an agent to go out and build some capabilities that we believe are going to be important in the future. So I was like, what's going on here? I'm not needed anymore. Technology's changing. It's getting faster. It's getting smarter.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the MSP Pipeline. I'm your host, Kyle First. Today's guest is Ronald Gaines, the founder of Sim Robotics. Ron went from teaching himself programming on a Commodore 64 to serving in the Marine Corps to working in engineering at Grumman and eventually building a company focused on automation, aviation, and large-scale infrastructure projects across the country. Ron, I'm really excited to have you on here today. And I just want to say thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Cal, for having me on.
It's my pleasure.
Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to start with this. I always think the early years matter more than people realize because most successful founders usually had something in them early, whether that was curiosity, obsession, discipline, before the business ever existed. Most kids are outside playing sports. You were teaching yourself programming on a Commodore 64. So what would you say pulled you toward tech that early in your life?
Well, I was playing sports, but one of the things that, I got two gifts. One of them is I could pole vault, I can naturally pole vault. So I, did things in high school and state and some other stuff. But then I kind of knew about computers and I really kind of don't understand how I knew. I remember a friend having a computer, Commodore 64. We would play baseball in his yard. And I remember going in, looking at his computer. I knew at 11 years old that I needed to put it in graphic mode. I somehow knew the basic language and how to kind of draw lines on the screen to make a stick bigger. And then I compiled it. And so I knew you had to compile it. I've never seen that before. Not anything that they taught me in school, but it's something that I knew. But I had this ability in computer science. And so when I decided that I wanted to go to college and I looked for a career, I picked computer science, and that's exactly what I did.
That's awesome. And you also were in the Marines. So how much did the Marines shape the way you operate as a business owner today, would you say?
I think the Marine Corps gave me something that was really important that I see a lot. I don't see a lot of. I could study computer science. I could, introduce myself to individuals to trying to start a business. But what I don't see a lot of is just a lot of practical opportunity to develop leadership skills. And so in the Marine Corps, it was all about leadership. I remember during the summers while I was in college, going to officer candidate school in Quantico, and then being, the focus was be a leader, be your leader. But then also there's a requirement to be a leader. You have to know how to be a follower. So, in that environment, you're getting a chance to follow, you're getting a chance to lead. And, it just gave me that opportunity. So when I graduated, I wanted to pursue my computer science career, but I wanted to kind of see the world. I ended up, getting a commission as a lieutenant in the Marine Corps, getting an opportunity to do leadership in the Marine Corps, developing leadership skills, seeing and meeting different types of folks and developing my own process of leadership.
Yeah, I love that. And, you're also, after the Marine Corps, you got into working engineering at Grumman. So was there a moment when you're working at Grumman that the corporate life stopped feeling like it was the long-term plan and that you wanted to build Sim Robotics?
Well, I had a pretty interesting corporate life, right? When I was in the Marine Corps, I wanted to make sure that I could get a job in computer science. And I was not sure. I majored in computer science, but if you're not in the field and, I did my 5 years in the Marine Corps, you wouldn't know. So, I was at sea for 2 years. Before I left, I bought a laptop. I bought the most recent books, some 1,400-page books of ODBC, C++ API. And so I spent 2 years studying every day. I studied at sea when I was on ship in the Marine Corps. I studied at least 14 hours a day, just studying. I enjoyed it. Computers were a lot slower back then. Compiling a single application probably took about, in some cases, an hour,
Yeah.
2 hours on these small systems as well. So, waking up at night, checking my code, there's a comma or an equal symbol that's syntax that's not right, and I'm correcting it and I'm compiling it again, another 2 hours. And so what I eventually ended up doing was starting to look for a job to get out of the Marine Corps. I would go on interviews. And what would happen is I would have 2, 4, 6 hour interviews. My focus was on, these microcomputers at the time, client server applications. And, one of the things I was always told in the interview is that what you're doing is what we want to do in the future. And so I was asked to start consulting, to doing some consulting while I was, on my way out of the Marine Corps. I did that. And then when I went into industry, I quickly found my way into consulting very,
Mhm.
very soon. And I consulted for like 15 years. So I eventually did a project for Northrop Grumman. They, asked me to, come on as an employee. I declined. Well, I usually decline. I had been declining for a long time. And then I eventually took the job because I thought, can I keep a job? And I was able to stay there for a while. I ended up being in the laser systems division in Orlando, Florida, working for the factory there, kind of building, manufacturing software to manage and monitor equipment, to moving to corporate. I mean, I was asked to go into corporate. I became one of the architects working with building their front end presentations, and their web implementation of Northrop Grumman, SharePoint. I still think I see some of the code that I wrote
Yeah.
there whenever I go to the website. And then I also ended up working and traveling around the company to design the first private cloud architecture that they had in place. And I did that for a while. So it was very interesting. I was very excited. I was very excited about the cloud stuff. And then I eventually decided, well, this is a good opportunity for me to continue my entrepreneurial drive. And then at that point, I moved into SimRobotics, and I've been supporting or part of the SimRobotics team ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've got a great career path. It's definitely different than mine so far, at least. So, starting a business is one thing, though, Ron, right? But starting a
Yeah.
technical company from scratch using your own savings while trying to build credibility in a highly specialized industry, that's just different. So, what did that first year actually look like with Sim Robotics?
Well, you got to have the love of being an entrepreneur and running a company. And initially, you hear that story about you start a company, there's rose petals that they throw in your feet, and everywhere you go, everybody knows your name. That's not true. Not at all. And so it turned into more like, you see that big pot of lava. I'm going to jump in that and start swimming and
Yep.
learn to love it. And that's exactly what it is. You end up uh, going through the challenges of finance, payroll, marketing, sales, finding business. You're looking for opportunities to grow your company. You're also having to always be creative and building new products. If you're in the business and you're looking for the growth, what you're going to do is you're going to have an idea of what you want to do, but you're going to also kind of keep your head on the swivel and look for opportunities as they pass by, because you never know. What you think you're going to do may not be the primary activity. You may have a subset of that, or maybe you may have a larger level of that, or maybe you actually may end up doing something else different, or
Mhm.
you may be doing multiple things. An example for Sim Robotics, Sim Robotics, we're a software engineering company. We like working with customers, developing software, developing systems, going through that whole development lifecycle, multi-tier application services. I remember that they were building an airport terminal in Orlando, Terminal C. And, I had been going to some business meetings. I had been commuting to Fargo for, as an enterprise architect for supporting their Blue Cross Blue Shield. that kind of spanned across multiple states, and I was the enterprise architect of some 260 developers. That was the consulting support that I was providing at that time. And in that room, there was a discussion about architectural work and BIM and modeling, which is building information management systems, and then all the underlying systems there. So what I did was I slowly backed out of the room because I knew, hey, we can do that. It's 3D, it's data, it's information. We can do that. And so I quickly, because I believe at the core of what I do, with the Marine Corps and computer science and the projects that I've been on, we're project managers.
Yeah.
We look at a problem, we figure out the development life cycle of that problem, survey, study, definition, construction, maintenance, and support. It's always the same process, but you have different models that you use for different environments. And so I built a team, I put people in place for that team, and then I went back in and promoted our capability. I learned the things that I needed to learn to get the team in place. I brought some folks in and that I trained to develop good skill sets behind, the BIM service support that we provided. And so the company was able to support this Terminal C. Matter of fact, some of those projects are still going right now. We've been supporting it for more than 5 or 6 years. It's just one of the locations, and we've been able to become national in BIM service support. And we're also supporting an example here in Orlando, the Terminal C development for San Antonio Airport, SAT. And so we're playing a different role there, where we're working with the owner and the general contractor. But again, we're supporting them as best we can. We're always looking for more opportunity to work in San Antonio and to work at the airport. And that's always, things you do, and that's a challenge. But, looking for opportunity, it's not exactly what we were planning to do. But, if you think about it, that BIM, that building information systems, which is basically the 3D architectural modeling of all the components of a system, of a building or construction, even that's starting to turn into information services. Now you have products that are being installed. There's real-time data that's being extracted. There's digital twin models that can be constructed from that. So we're always trying to look for those opportunities. Again, getting more business out of a central location is always hard. Adjusting, communicating, and then going where you can to support your customer base, and having those referrals, call you back is obviously your goal.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of MSPs have the ups and downs trying to build out their pipeline, right? But what worked for you early when trying to build momentum with SimRobotics?
Well, it didn't just pop up. It was very slow in the beginning. I say we, but there's so many things that are happening. You usually say wait, right? I look for opportunities for the company, for the staff that I was bringing on, to make sure that we had the revenue that was coming on. And you can't guarantee exactly how much revenue is going to come on at any given time until you've grown, until you have a customer base. And at the very beginning of your company, you don't have a customer base. Mm-hmm. So you have to work through that. And so there are things that worked. There's things that still work today. One of them is communicating out to customers to try to see what they're looking for, look for opportunities that are there in the organization. Another thing is to communicate to your existing customers about your service and what additionally you can provide. And so those are things that we've been doing. Those are things we've been trying to support, and growth is slow, but you obviously have to consistently put effort in to keep it going.
Yeah, definitely. And I recall you said you love to go to conferences, face-to-face relationships. But like, how key is that in winning business, getting a new client?
Well, I think that the key here is that you go to the conference, you go to some meeting, some business gathering. There's a great opportunity, and I've always I've been able to make good connections when I've gone to the right conference.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the key. Finding the right place for your business, finding the right service you need for your business. And those conferences, what they've done is, what I've tried to do, there's a couple of large conferences in San Antonio. They've also had them in Orlando because we kind of work out of both places. We have an office in San Antonio, we have an office in Orlando. Go around and talk to people, communicate. I mean, the growth may be small, but over time, the growth collects. And so by reaching in and communicating your ideals and concepts, but you know, moving yourself forward, building those tools, introducing those tools to folks, and you may not get a result right away, but eventually there's an opportunity for them to come back and support you.
Yeah, definitely. It sounded definitely interesting to me. I'll tell you that right there. But, talking about growth, right? Like, how dangerous can growth be, like actually become if you scale too fast?
Well, you can definitely scale too fast. I mean, scaling is great. Great growth is great.
Mhm.
Getting an opportunity to grow is great. But if you grow and you don't have a off ramp, in other words, how do I scale down, or how do I move from lots of work to less work and still support and manage my employee? That's where the challenges are. Or maybe not manage the finances of the growth and bring on resources that maybe you can't support after that growth. And so there's measurements. Do
Definitely.
you not take a project that's going to make you bigger than you ever were? It's hard not to. But what's better is 3 projects that are going to make you bigger than
Yeah,
what you ever were, because you want to diversify and you want to be able to scale back.
of course, definitely understand that. Do you ever feel any pressure when, having employees actually depend on you nowadays?
Every day, every day. I think the most for what I've seen in the past, the most important thing is payroll.
Yeah,
Because if you have employees that depend on you and you're supporting them, then you don't want to let them down. You want to be able to make sure you're consistent. If they do good work, you want to pay them good. And so payroll and making payroll is always a challenge, but it's important.
definitely right there. One thing I think a lot of founders underestimate is that eventually the business stops being about technology and starts becoming about leadership. When did you realize, you actually had to build people just as much as building a system, how much that mattered?
Um, you know, um, Building people is a challenge, and there's different ways you could do it. You can hire someone who's accomplished, who knows what to do, who's as good as it as you are, and that's great, but they're going to probably cost more. Or you can develop a resource that you can depend on, that builds some loyalty, that is going to be there, because you provided a way, or may not be there. They may decide to go somewhere else. You never know. But you can kind of tailor them to your needs. And so building resources that you can tailor to the company needs gives you that opportunity to train a resource, but it also gives you an opportunity to kind of give back to the community, because a lot of times, if you don't hire folks, if you don't train them, we won't have those resources in the community. And if we don't have those resources in the community, how do we move the needle? And so, I like to do that. I like to do it when I can, but it's also convenient to have someone who already knows what to do as well.
No, of course, definitely understand that. It's great to bring good people into an organization, right? But like, how are you building a strong culture inside Sim Robotics?
Well, what I do is a lot of patience. So
Yeah, I understand that.
you explain things, you explain them again and again. You uh, take the time to explain what you do, and then also you're aware that you will provide a process and resources to do the work, and your initial ideal may not work in the future.
Mhm.
And so as long as they're doing a great job and as long as they're figuring it out, maybe they evolve that process in the future. And so you do that as well. And so stay open-minded, stay learning, figure out what's next, and try to make sure your resources are consistent, maintaining their support and kind of moving in the right direction.
Definitely. And what do you think, younger founders misunderstand about leadership?
I think what I think the biggest issue is that they think that it's free.
Yeah.
That they think that young folks think, or some younger folk, uh, uh, employees think that they come into the workplace. There was a time where everybody wanted to be a director, and not everybody can be a director, and not everybody starts off as a director. And a summary of information from AI or summary of information from the internet does not make you an expert. You always got to go through your 10,000 hours. That's true. And so I think that the process of moving through learning and understanding how learning comes in not only layers, but it comes over time. It moves back and forth based on the state of things, the state of your understanding of things. So you can't learn XYZ because you haven't learned ABC.
Mhm.
And so, that's something that a lot of young people do not understand.
No, I definitely understand that. I want to shift a little bit into the industry right now because it feels like the industry is entering another massive shift right now with AI and automation. And unlike a lot of people talking about AI theoretically, you're already implementing it directly into your business. So, what would you say excites you the most about AI right now?
So probably the thing that excites me the most about AI is it's changing and
Mhm.
it's evolving. And I think it's more powerful than most people think. In other words, what we used to do a couple of years ago, where we're just kind of asking questions, now we have full automation. I have agents that are basically employees of my company that are building and developing software right now, analyzing products that we sell, example with the Tooth Snap website. So this technology is moving very fast, and I think that we really have to be careful about the technology having too much control, but
Yeah.
also we can't, get in the way. We should let it grow as best as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And how are you currently using automation internally?
Well, right now I have agents, and those agents um, are basically, to me, employees, and they have jobs and responsibilities, either marketing or development or management or research or even recruiting. And so by putting those agents in place and by having them interact with me and me being able to make the request, I think the biggest challenge that I'm having right now is that I can only tell them to do so many things
Mhm.
because sometimes that work happens very quickly. I have some new robotic systems that we're building right now, and I needed an agent to go out and build some capabilities that we believe are going to be important in the future. It actually took shorter than for me to push the button. So I was like, what's going on here? I'm not needed anymore. And so, yeah, I think that technology is changing. It's getting faster. It's getting smarter, and those are going to be not only challenges for the transition of employees to jobs. In
Mhm.
other words, what do we do best? What do AI and automated agents do best? What is the best way for us to use them? How can we scale our work, and how can we protect our information, that we're providing or we're giving them access to?
Yeah. And do you believe the agents are going to be, become the standard in this industry?
I think that it's already standard, and I think it's happening a lot more than what you think. And I think that you're going to start seeing the fruits of that labor of automating more work and activity in the background
Mhm.
within the next year to year and a half. You're going to see a lot of work that users normally do. It's going to be automated.
Definitely. And what do you think is going to happen to those companies that ignore AI over the next few years?
You can't ignore it because I'm going to use an agent that costs me $3 a day, or I'm going to, to do some specific work, or I'm going to, pay, $1,000 a day. I think that, there's a balance there in how do we take that employee and position them in a place to use agents to help them do more work is where the balance is. That how do you orchestrate the work environment with agents, and how do you manage your resources, your employees in the organization?
Yeah, definitely. And I know I watch the news a lot and I see people talking about AI might take over our jobs, but there's still that human relationship aspect of it. So where do you think human relationships still matter even in an AI driven world?
They matter because you can't have a business to business relationship with an agent,
Yeah.
you know, and you can't, agents are good, but they don't have the bigger ideal about how this all should go, and they have vision, but implementation of that vision takes direction, and that's where the humans come in. That's where, you know, your employees come in. So, chopping that work up into components that can be digested by agents and humans, and building and understanding the workflows to integrate those components, integrate those needs and requirements is the manager's responsibility, the leader's responsibility. I have this concept, we talk about leadership in with employees, but there's also a need to have leadership for agents as well. In other words, what do I have them do, and how much time am I willing to have them do this before I decide that maybe I need to have an employee step in and control a little bit more of the requirements.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think any specific industry is going to be changing faster than another?
Computer science has changed quicker than anybody,
Yeah.
right? But I think finance is changing. I think anything in the middle tier, anything white collar is going to have some challenges. All my agents are doctorate level implementation experts. So, I usually in the past I've worked with a lot of doctorate personnel, and usually they're great resources to provide some high level analytics and some of the conceptual stuff. And so, that's pretty much how it's going to look in the future.
Definitely understand that. To close this out, we do have a two-part question. We're gonna start with part one. So now, if you can go back to that younger version of yourself, the kid teaching himself programming, the Marine, what advice would you give yourself before you started building Sim Robotics?
I would give myself the advice of do a little bit more study on finance, build a better business plan before I start. That's important. A long-term role planned out, and that's my goal.
I love it.
That's one thing that I would do.
Yeah, and is there something you hope people remember about the way you built out Sim Robotics before it all ends out?
I built SimRobotics because I loved computer science. I loved, business, and I loved an opportunity to travel and see the world and provide new technology and services. And so, we're still new. We're just starting. I feel like we're still babies. There's still more to come, and there's new concepts and products that we're working on right now. I think they're going to be pretty excited to kind of watch out for in the future. So I built Sim Robotics to hopefully never end, and that's what I want them to remember. And hopefully, we provide quality, direct support and interactive services that they want now and they want in the future.
I love it. Well, Ron, thank you very much again for being here today. It was truly a pleasure to have you on. I loved hearing your story, and just want to say thank you once again.
Hey, thank you so much, Kyle. And I look forward to seeing the pods, and I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Yes, sir. Definitely. All right. Thank you, Ron.